All right, so let's see if you spot it. On the left, I have the coordinates of the Great Pyramids, basically one of the largest structures ever built in ancient history, or at least one of the largest that we know of, if there hasn't been anything older. And then on the right, we have the speed of light. Now, the speed of light is constant. And if I do this, just look at those two numbers. Here we have 299, and then it is 299, and then we have 792, and it's 792. These two are exactly the same. And one would ask why. So we have the coordinates of the Great Pyramid, which is where you're going to find them on the planet or on the globe. And then we also have the speed of light, and they coincidentally happen to be the same for some reason. All right. Well, if you find that interesting, well, I have something else to show you. Let's ask the question, who was the most important Egyptian deity? And the grand majority of what you will read will either say Ra or a variation of Ra, such as Amun-Ra, or Horus, who is basically Ra. Ra, arguably ancient Egypt's most important god. Ra was the creator god. All right, but let's go read up a little bit more about this Ra character. And if you go to the Wikipedia page, it says, was the ancient Egyptian deity of the sun. That's interesting. So, the coordinates of the pyramids of Egypt just so happen to be the same number as the speed of light, and light comes from where? Light comes from the sun, and that was their most important deity. Are you noticing a pattern here? That maybe these stories have a little bit more to say than, well, what we see on the surface. I'm putting together a weekly webinar where I'm actually going to go deeper into this, but what it's actually about is numbers and mathematics, funny enough, but not in the same way you probably learned about maths in school. This is going to be maths in the same way that it was taught in ancient times. You see, something I noticed while reading texts all over the planet was that the ancients used to tie everything together. In other words, maths was connected to storytelling, philosophy, spirituality. They took a whole bunch of different stuff and put it together into one. And you may ask, well, why was this done? I think largely because it is easier to remember and it's a lot more entertaining to learn. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons. So I teach for a long time now. I've taught online classes. I've taught how to edit videos. I've taught how to do graphic design, do music production. And a lot of the people I teach are students that are going to school. And during exam periods, a lot of them will go on a pause for the classes because they, because of all the exam pressure. So for a while now, I've been wanting to teach something relating to the school syllabus, and I chose maths because maths is universal and I think it's very important. However, I just didn't want to teach it in the same way that, well, they teach it everywhere else. That boring, dull, gray, lifeless, how many people enjoy maths at school? You do get people who enjoy it, but generally, most people, we don't really enjoy maths. We might do games, we might like stories, we might even like comprehension, right? Reading a story and giving answers about that story, or maybe creative story writing. The thing with maths is, there's no color, there's no odor, there's no scent, there's no story to them. It's just this plain dead thing that has to do with varying quantities. I mean, what makes 8 so different to 5? Well, nothing more than it's 3 units more than 5, right? And something to do with the brain is the brain doesn't really remember numbers as well as it remembers objects and stories. If I said, remember 5, 6, 9, 2, 8, versus if I were to tell someone, remember cat, dog, fish, rat, you'll probably remember the cat, dog, fish, rat more easily. we've been actually drawing symbols and pictures on cave art even before we've even had mathematics or writing, right? And I think this is one of the large reasons why the ancients wouldn't just tell numbers, they would mix it in with their stories and their legends, and they had some very profound stories to tell about the history of humanity, you know, and everything within it. So, you know, I've put together a course on this point where I teach maths relating to the school syllabus in a fun, interesting way like this, where they will work something out and discover like this mind-blowing thing. Oh my God, what I just discovered is that, you know, the pyramid coordinates is the speed of light, or, oh, they actually knew pi, or, you know, knew phi, the ratio of phi, and all these interesting things that they shouldn't have known. That's how the course goes. And as I begin teaching, I teach them about their mythology, their history, their belief system, and the grand story that emerges from all these numbers. You would be surprised how something as seemingly boring as the varying quantities of things can tell such a deep and philosophical story about humanity, which leads me over here where okay, so this is one of the slides to my course, and let's just go over there. All right, don't know why it's giving the start bar of Windows, should be going full screen, but whatever, you can pretty much see it. There is a long forgotten story in the numbers of our great-grandfathers. It shows us the resilience of the human spirit through trying times. It begins before there were seasons. A great war broke out in the sky, and the earth shook so hard that it moved its axis, making summer and winter. Now look, a lot of the, if you look into the story of Ra, and we're going to get into this, but just like a summary, you know, Ra is all about the seasons and time. You see, Ra, who was originally Osiris, was murdered. Who was he murdered by? He was murdered by a being called Set. And what is Set? Well, what does the sun do when it dies? Or when the sun starts to go down, it sets, right? So many of these myths and stories had to do with time, had to do with the progression and the movement of time, and looking into something, let's say, looking into something such as the speed of light. What is the speed of light? Speed of light is a measure of movement over time, but also the speed of light is used for very accurate clocks, like atomic clocks. Let's go a little bit further into this as well. It has to do with very old astrological ages. Now, I want to do these videos very short and give you little pieces of the story here and there. But if you want to know more about this, you can be sure to watch my other videos. And in order to do that, so I'm putting together my MathAMagician course, but every Saturday I'm just going to be doing a free webinar where I talk about this stuff because I find it very fascinating, and I love sharing it with people. So if you want to find out more about this stuff, but also about some of the courses and stuff like that, you can go to this link over here and fill in this form, right? You just tell us about yourself, and I'll let you know when all the webinars and stuff are, or you could join this webinar over here on this link. And every Saturday, we're going to just be talking on this topic. Here's the password, basically capital A, and we'll be going over the story in ancient legends, ancient myths all over the world. One thing I can actually close off on is, interesting point. Okay, so you probably know about the theory of relativity by Einstein. The more quick an object moves, the more time slows down for that object. Time travel, right? But what happens at the speed of light? Apparently at the speed of light, time pauses. In other words, time is movement. Look at a clock. You know, you might call it time, but there is something moving in it. So at the speed of light, if a spaceship theoretically could move at the speed of light, all the clocks will pause, but also everything would seem to freeze. They have a movement of nothing, right? But also, one is very important in the speed of light, and it links to one in many ways. I won't get too much on relativity, but the speed of light is the point in which all space converges to a single point, right? In other words, if you could travel at the speed of light, which is impossible for an object of mass, all mass would go to a point, but also all time would stay at a point, one point, and not move from there. I want to show you something interesting over here. Look at the number for the speed of light. If you add up all the values, okay, of this number, they will all add up to 1. And this little thing of adding up the numbers I use in many places, and it was actually a technique that was incorporated in all sorts of building style and stuff, you know, and methods in the ancient culture, in ancient cultures all over the planet. And it was used to tell stories, symbolize things, create metaphors. I'm going to add up all these numbers and it gives us 55. Okay, cool. Let's continue what we did before. Added up all the numbers, we got 55. Let's add up 5 and 5. Okay, well, what's 5 plus 5? It equals 10. Nope. Sorry, I went 5 multiplied by 5. My bad. Let's go 5 plus 5. It gives us 10. Okay, and what is 10? Well, 1 plus 0 is going to create 1, right? And that summarizes, well, that's pretty symbolic of the speed of light. The speed of light is that point in which all space converges into 1. If you were traveling the speed of light, time moves to a halt. It's like 1, it stands still. And also, in order to move the speed of light, you have to be the size of a Planck length. That one unit, the one fundamental unit, you can't get smaller than. What's the Planck length? Well, the universe is kind of pixelated like a computer screen. All right, and that method I showed you, we'll get more into it in the course. But yeah, basically, this is a course that tells a story. It's not specific to Egypt, although I do refer a lot to Egypt, but it is a story spoken about all over the planet. And in my maths course, what I do, okay, this is outside of the webinar, is I teach maths rather than when giving the students exercises, rather than making it this arbitrary thing like 942 multiplied by 365, I say, go measure the circumference of the Earth, right? Let me show you over here, right? I'll say something along the lines of, well, go get the radius of the sun, multiply it by the perimeter of the pyramid and divide it by 10. Let me know your answer. And that will be the exercise. But when they do it, they figure out something profound, such as it equals the circumference of the Earth, right? So that's basically my program in a nutshell. So yeah, if you're interested, some details, and I will see you on the next Saturday.